Thanks for having me here. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, ji. And welcome, Mr. Rajiv Nath. Rajiv Nath ji, आप muted हैं.
Namaskar, everyone.
नमस्कार जी.
यार अब
Hey, good morning, everyone. Vibhav from Boston Scientific.
Morning, Shiva.
Morning, Manish. Morning, Rajiv. Hi, Ravi. Morning, Mr. Multani.
Good morning.
Morning, Vibhav.
so just give me a minute. I'm coordinating with Mr. Rinma's office. A very good morning to all. Thank you, Senior Vice President, Mr. Pradeep Multani. Thank you, sir, for joining us today and taking out time for this important webinar. I'd like to welcome Mr. Rajiv Nath. How are you, Rajiv? I hope you're doing fine. You're always all over the media. Thank you very much for joining us. We have, I don't think Rajiv needs any introduction, but let me definitely say he's the forum coordinator for IMEC. I'd like to thank Mr. Bhargav Kataria, MD of Sejanand Medical Technologies Private Limited. Thank you very much, Bhargavji, for joining us this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
We have the pleasure of having Mr. Manish Sardana, President of the India Business for Polymedicure Limited. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Sardana.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Let me welcome my friend from Boston Scientific. It's nice to always have you with us, Vibhav. A warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivek. Thanks for inviting me for this and having me here. Thank you. Morning, everyone.
Vibhav is Director, Health Economics and Government Affairs for the India Hub and the ASEAN region for Boston Scientific. Great to have you. We'll definitely have a lot of perspective from the multinationals. like to thank Mr. Vivek Tiwari, founder and CEO of Medica Bazaar, for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning,
Thanks.
everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. Thank you, Vivekji.
Thank you. And I think we could address each other as namesakes during the webinar.
Yes, absolutely.
I can see the windows of Dr. Jitendra Sharma, MD and CEO of AMTZ. Ravi, can you contact his office to check whether he can start his window so that we can start the program quickly on time? And also check for the chair quickly if he's facing any problems in logging in, Dr. Subramanian. Dr. Sameer Gupta, our co-chair for the Health Committee. Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta, for joining us. It'll be nice to have your, yes, we can see you now. Thank you very much, Dr. Sameer. A warm welcome. You're muted.
Thank you so much for having me, Vivek. Thank you so much.
No, it's our pleasure. And we've just been joined by Mr. Rajesh Patel, CEO for IVD India for Tron Healthcare. So nice to see you, Mr. Patel. I know Dr. Velu could make it, but it's so gracious of him to have you with us this morning because it's a very important webinar which we have today for the medical devices industry, I would say.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your warm welcome note. And I'm really pleased to be part of this webinar.
Wonderful. So with the permission of the Senior Vice President, sir, may we start? Or shall we wait for the chair?
Any idea how long he will take? Because we have a lot of speakers also.
Right, sir.
Sir, Dr. Subramaniam, sir, is just joining in, 30 seconds.
Okay, that's good.
Vivek, I think we can start, and when he comes in, then we can always introduce him and give him the floor after the speaker is over, whoever is speaking this time.
Yeah, we will just give him about 25 seconds to join in so that he remains in the entire proceedings from the start. So I'll just give you a quick background on what we are doing or what we are starting to do today. It's going to be a series of webinars. So there are 4 webinars which are planned between now and end of February. And the objective here is to be able to figure out what should be the roadmap for the medical devices industry. Due to the COVID, I think it's sprung back into a lot of action. It had been already catching up with the pharma industry, which I know medical devices industry used to always keep complaining that we don't get enough attention. But while that was happening, now the COVID happened, and I think medical devices is top of the agenda for, I think, starting from patients right down to government, whether it is international or Indian government. Today, what we are starting is, as I said, a series which will actually culminate in a report, which we would like to submit to the ministry to suggest the way forward for the Indian industry. And in that report, we would like to cover all aspects, 360-degree perspective. So we have a wide range of panel today so that we get all the views. And when I say all, it's in capital and bold. So we have the MNCs here. We have the voice of the Indian manufacturers. We have none other than, let me welcome Dr. Jitendra Sharma. Nice to have you. Dr. Jitendra Sharma doesn't need any introduction to the medical devices fraternity. Thank you very much. So our idea, and AMT is our knowledge partner in this series. So they will help us consolidate the report with all the knowledge which they have back at AMTZ, plus what we hear from the webinar speakers to compile that report. And my humble request would be that we focus right now, not on the contents as much of the report, which we will definitely deliberate in the coming seminars and webinars. But in this, we actually at least have a complete framework ready by the end of this webinar as to what all should we be talking about. What are the gray areas? What are the subjects which need to be covered in this report? With this little background, I'll invite our Senior Vice President, Shri Pradeep Multani ji, to kindly welcome all the delegates and the panelists. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vivek Sehgal. Good morning, all. On behalf of PhD Chamber, I welcome everyone to the webinar on development of National Medical Technology Roadmap. We will shortly be joined by our chief guest, Shri Navdeep Rindwa, Joint Secretary, Department of Pharmaceuticals, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, and guest of honor, Dr. V.G. Somani, Drugs Controller General of India, CDSCO. Both of them shall be joining us by noon. That's what they had said. And we thank them for sparing the time and the support to our industry as well as to PHDCCI. We also welcome our panelists of the session today, Dr. Jitendra Sharma, Managing Director, AMTZ, Mr. Bhargav Kotadia, MD, Shahjahanand Medical Technologies Private Limited, Mr. Vaibhav Garg, Director, Health Economics and Government Affairs, India Hub and ASEAN, Boston Scientific, Mr. Rajiv Nath, Forum Coordinator, IMED, Mr. Manish Sardana, President, India Business Medicure Limited, Mr. Vivek Tiwari, Founder and CEO, Medica Bazaar, Mr. Ramesh Patel, CEO, Trivatron Healthcare, Dr. Subramaniam, Chairman of our Health Committee of PhD, Dr. Samir Gupta, Co-Chair of our Health Committee of PhD, and today's session moderator is Mr. Vivek Sehgal, Assistant Secretary General, PhD Chambers. Ladies and gentlemen, PHDCCI has been working as a catalyst for the promotion of Indian industry, trade, and entrepreneurship for the past 116 years. It is a forward-looking, proactive, and dynamic pan-India apex organization. As a partner in progress with industry and government, PhD Chamber, with special focus on MSMEs, works at the grassroots level with strong national and international linkages for propelling progress, harmony, and integrated development of the Indian economy. Our PhD Chamber reaches out to more than 150,000 MSMEs. Majority of them are MSMEs. Medical technology, or medtech as it is popularly known worldwide, is a boon to the mankind intended to improve the overall quality of healthcare delivered through early diagnosis, less invasive treatment options, and reductions in hospital stays and rehabilitation times at reduced costs. Medical technology is responsible for increasing life expectancy in many disease areas, improving quality of life, and allowing people to remain integrated, economically productive, and socially active members of society. MedTech encompasses a wide range of healthcare products that may broadly include medical devices, information technology, biotech, and healthcare services used to treat diseases or medical conditions affecting humans. The market size of the medical devices industry in India is estimated to be US $11 billion, and the device sector is likely to grow to US $65 billion industry by 2024. Around 65% of the manufacturers in India are mostly domestic players operating in the consumables segment and catering to local consumption with limited exports. Large multinational corporations lead the high technology end of the medical devices market with extensive service networks. There are 750-800 domestic medical devices manufacturers in India with an average investment of US $2.3 to 2.7 billion and an average turnover of US $6.2 to 6.9 billion. A majority of India's medical devices, ranging from a simple thermometer to cotton wool and electrocardiograph ECG machines to catheters, are imported, and up to 11% of them are from China. In 2019-20, India imported medical devices worth 42,245 crore, of which China accounted for a 11% share at rupees 4,559 crores. Of the 147 categories of devices, analysis of import data showed that the dependence on China was high in 11 product categories. These include acupuncture apparatus, pregnancy confirmation kits, ice bags, clinical thermometers, adhesive gauze bandages, corn and callus removers, fistula needles, weighing scales, hot water bottles, articles of apparel and clothing accessories, and portals of clothing. Imports of these 11 categories were worth 109.67 crore, of which China's share was 95.51 crores, around 87%, according to 1920 projections. Epidemiological transition in India from communicable to include non-communicable diseases is driving key medtech segments. There is a demand for both cutting-edge precision technologies and for affordable low technology. The Indian medtech innovation ecosystem is fast evolving and vibrant with academic research, venture capital, government funding, and promising startups developing products specifically for the Indian market. Availability of advanced and sophisticated medical technology is creating new markets and applications, increasing the dependence by doctors on advanced medical devices. This is leading to rapid obsolescence of existing medical technology, thereby creating demand for replacement and upgradation of products. Good quality, affordable, and comprehensive healthcare to all its citizens is the new age universal mantra, especially after many loopholes emerged globally courtesy of the corona pandemic. While healthcare infrastructure and indigenous medical device manufacturing are the areas in which most countries have achieved self-sufficiency, the medical device sector in India, with about 80% plus import dependency, needs focused attention and policy interventions to achieve self-sufficiency. Further, over the last few years, policies in this sector are evolving, changing frequently, which brings in unpredictability and lack of confidence in manufacturers. However, acknowledging the immense potential of the medtech industry, India is looking to improve self-sufficiency as part of the Make in India initiative. The rapidly expanding sector presents immense opportunities to global players. India is full of opportunities for medical devices companies to explore and expand the business horizons in the ever-booming Indian healthcare market. Today, we have the eminent speakers from the industry and policy regulators from the government to discuss about how to reduce the import dependency in medical technology with a view to develop the National Medical Technology Roadmap. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of PHD Chamber, I once again welcome you all and look forward to your active and valuable participation in this important session. Thank you very much. God bless everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Senior Vice President. Definitely all these guidelines and the information which you have shared will help us wade through this webinar with proper focus on how we develop this roadmap and submit a worthy report to the government. I'd like to warmly welcome Dr. N. Subramanian, our chair of the Health Committee of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also the medical director of Apollo Hospitals. Thank you very much, Dr. Subramanian. Very nice to have you. May I request you for your opening remarks?
Namaskar. Thank you, Mr. Sehgal, and Senior Vice President Pradeep Multani for an overview of the value of the medical devices. I'm delighted to see such eminent useful and a very broad-based analysis of what needs to be done and where we go forward. It's my great desire that because we have speakers with a lot of specific expertise and content, so I would like to just say a few words about the importance of what this program is going to be about. We are all aware that the medical devices sector plays a very critical role in modern medicine. The entire advance of medicine has relied a lot on technology, on devices, and most of what we achieve today in medical outcomes is significantly relies on equipment. I've been in the practice of medicine for about over 45. I've seen a considerable change the way things have happened. We also know that the recent, the COVID pandemic has also exposed the limitations of even some of the most robust parameters. In terms of the trade and in terms of the value of import and the value of production, I think Senior Vice President Pradeep Multani gave a wonderful overview, so I wouldn't want to go into that segment. The three factors which are very important: number one, we are a growing and aging population, number one. Number two, the constant and frequent evidence of increase in the non-communicable diseases along with existing infectious diseases is a double whammy that countries like ours have to cope with. If we were to look at the non-communicable diseases and the amount that you and I might expend on treating non-communicable diseases in the next 4 to 5 years, it is a whopping $47 trillion. So I think we really need to take note of the fact that prevention becomes a very, very important component, number one. Number two, for conditions to be treated adequately, we need to diagnose them early. So we need to provide increasing access, awareness, and affordability of treatment to all the people. And hence, the value of technology as applied to all these areas becomes extremely valuable. You know, it is believed that 40% of the deaths in this country would perhaps be due to heart-related or cardiac-related conditions, which a couple of decades ago was about 24%. We also know that a country like India, million diabetics. It is not just the diabetes which bothers us, but diabetes is also one of the leading causes of people having infections, losing their limbs, people losing their eyesight, people losing their kidney functions, and also increases the risk of heart disease as well. So let us quickly look at the areas where technology and medical devices have come in and have been of a great role in making sure that we provide the best outcomes. We are all familiar that during the COVID era, one of the methods which was very effectively utilized to provide good quality consultative healthcare was the use of the telehealth or the telemedicine platforms. So the ability to access healthcare from remote locations was one of the very, very important parameters. This, however, applies to various other areas as well. I mean, Apollo were the first to introduce telemedicine in terms of teleconsultation way back in 2005. And we have remote facilities at as high as 4,000 feet above the sea level, which helps us to make sure that the availability of experts to consult is possible. But briefly, when we look at the areas where the progress has been made, we have looked at the Internet of Medical Things. We have looked at medical robots. We have looked at the value of 3D printing and medical devices. We have focused on the value of the cloud computing, the value of using the digital platforms, not only to capture information, but use artificial intelligence to analyze, evaluate this information for even a risk stratification of people. The role of the wearable technologies including the HMDs and the smartwatches, etc., are very, very popular forms of wearable technology, and they are expected to grow by almost 50%. So I think that in terms of what we are aiming to achieve in healthcare, one, access, awareness, affordability to all the big 1.3 billion population, particularly focusing on prevention, particularly focusing on those who are growing older, and particularly focusing on cost effective treatments. I think we are well on track. As we all know, the Make in India approach of the government today, and with some of our experts sitting here today who are able to produce some excellent devices, excellent components, excellent medicines, which are not only going to be increasing the availability of the same to all our population, but I dare say will make it available at a fraction of the cost. One of the greatest strengths of Indian healthcare has been that we are able to deliver quality healthcare at a fraction of the cost in the developed world. So I am pretty certain that taking this forward, this program today, the deliberations are really going to help us to plan a very clear roadmap to see how we can enhance the value of Make in India, enhance the value of the various components that we use in healthcare to make sure that we eventually become the healthcare destination of the world. I must thank Mr. Sehgal, Dr. Rathore, for really putting together a wonderful program and such eminent speakers. I'm really looking forward to learning a lot from this event, and I'm really honored and delighted to be a part of this program. So let me welcome you all again. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Subramaniam, for a very, very comprehensive understanding of this industry, and with your specialist comments being a healthcare provider, one of the topmost healthcare providers in the country. Before we run out of the time for Dr. Jitendra Sharma, because I understand he has to go out for another meeting, I'd like to invite Dr. Jitendra Sharma for his overview and his thought processes on the medical devices roadmap as he sees it probably 10 years from now, and what all should we be talking about and working on in this report. Dr. Sharma? I think you're muted. We couldn't hear you.
That foundation.
Admin, can you please unmute Dr. Sharma from your end? Can you try from your side, please, Dr. Sharma? Are you able to unmute yourself? No. Ravi, can you tell
I think
the
he's
host?
unmuted, but there's some audio problem on his side. He's unmuted already. We cannot see the mute button on his.
Yes.
On his.
So Dr. Sharma is saying that let me join you at 12 noon after my next meeting. So if you could try one more time before you start to join your other meeting. No, you're not able to do that. Okay, so we'll wait for Dr. Sharma to come back to us at 12 noon. So fine, thank you. So let me, if I can call it a very, very important and a very critical round of discussions. I'd like to invite each of the speakers. That's the format I'd like to follow, unless anyone has a better idea. We can start with the speakers with their opening remarks, typically on what do they feel should be the roadmap. And then we can go into Q&A. I have a few questions lined up for all of them. And so that at the end of the seminar, as I said, we should be able to figure out what all needs to be done to take the medical devices sector to probably a $75 billion industry. I think let's talk from that perspective. And let me invite, first of all, our speaker, Mr. Rajiv Nath, on this particular aspect. Over to you, Rajiv.
Vivek, I understand it's a panel discussion. How much time do I have to speak, and can I make a presentation?
I would prefer, in case you can talk to start with, and give us your important key points in the opening remarks, and then when we come back to the panel discussion, maybe you would want to show some slides at that point of time.
Sure. And how much time do I have for speaking?
Anything between 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, that's a lot. Okay. Thanks, Vivek. Thanks, everyone, and the opportunity for having me over here. Working with PhD is always a pleasure for IMED. We have the same objectives to foster the industry and make in India, to create and follow the Prime Minister's vision of a Atmanirbhar Bharat. So to address the numbers which were mentioned earlier by Mr. Multani of the huge imports of 42,000 crore rupees and the ever-growing import bill, which is not slowing down. The percentage of imports also is not slowing down, even though the export growth is accelerating. The imports growth is not deaccelerating. So definitely of concern to us in India. And we have seen that in the recent times of COVID,
I did join, I did 5 minutes.
big focus. Some of you people have, I think, your mic on, and kindly put on mute. So there's been a big focus on medical devices when COVID started, because in February and March, people could see that masks are running short, PPE is not there in the country, and ventilators capacity would be limited. And we found that with good teamwork and inputs coming in from the government, very close coordinated working between the various government departments and the industry, both who are already manufacturing and who professed interest in this industry for the first time. So we had garment makers coming into this line, we had toy makers, hospitality, tourism, automakers coming in to make medical devices or seeking to help in the capacity constrained areas, and reached out to us in IMED. So we found that from 20 manufacturers in PPE, we've got more than 140 listed with IMED. And from hardly 6 million capacity per annum, we went up to 257 million pieces per annum. For surgical masks, there were 25 manufacturers earlier for the 3-ply mask, and there were only 5 manufacturers for N95 masks. Now there are 71 manufacturers listed with us for surgical masks, and more than 40 manufacturers for N95. No, more than 140 of them are listed with BIS now. So the capacity has gone up from 300 million masks to more than 3 billion surgical masks per year, and from hardly 13 million per annum to more than 1 billion pieces per annum of the N95 masks. Same thing for the ventilators. And in the test kits, there was no testing earlier for COVID because being a new disease. But of course, the people knew how to do making the IVD test kits. So from making swabs to VTM tubes to making extraction kits or RT-PCR kits, we have seen that generally in all these kind of product lines, India has now got a manufacturing surplus, not only to make for India, but also to go for the export market. In fact, they were feeling constrained until government started lifting up the export restrictions until June, July. And now even they're still there for something like an RT-PCR kit. So if we have done this before, so we need to do this again for all medical devices. Why should India be 80% import dependent when we can show that in a crisis we can come forward, we can also do it even without the crisis around us. So we should continue to work in teamwork with the government and address the key issues which trouble the certain sectors of the industry. So out of 147 HS codes which was mentioned earlier in the opening remarks, we are seeking that for 57 of the HS codes, there needs to be a predictive tariff protection policy. So any investor who comes into the country from India or overseas has an assurance that as he puts up the plant, is going to be given some sort of a tariff protection. And when he shows export competitiveness and further growth and international competitiveness, he can be given further protection. So this way it becomes predictive. That's how countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia are doing it when they invite manufacturers like us to put up factories over there. We can't continue to have second-hand imports coming in and manufacturers trying to make brand new equipment in India trying to compete with the second-hand imports. So this needs to be completely stalled and needs to go through a very strict regulatory pathway and not allowed without any regulatory approvals. The issue of medical devices to compete in private healthcare is again a big constraint, whereby we need to find that there needs to be ethical marketing, and ethical manufacturers should not feel that they lose a competitive edge to unethical players because they are trying to follow something to make the product affordable and accessible to the buyers. So we need to do something for that in terms of disallowing the use of trade margins to be a marketing tool. Everybody needs profits, but let's not have too much of that. The other area is in terms of the area of public healthcare procurement, whereby we are debarred from achieving our own market in India because of clauses like US FDA approval required to participate in the tenders. And innovators in India have a tough time trying to get in their new innovative medical devices into GEM or into the public healthcare procurement because they cannot be finding 3 of their competitors to make their innovative product. We have a separate medical device rule book, but we still need a separate medical device law. We need to decriminalize and move away from discouraging investment into this area because of the drug law, which criminalizes most of the minor offenses in the case of medical devices. Then the issue of infrastructure. If we need to be compliant with the drugs law or a medical device law, that compliance cannot be only on a marketing claim, it has to be proven. For proving that, access to testing facilities is required either in-house or out-house. So where we can do in-house is fine, but where we cannot do in-house, we need to have external testing. Over there is a challenge to create a bigger infrastructure and make it fast over there. We've seen that the lack of the infrastructure was a big stalling point in the case of PPE and ventilators to prove the quality of the Indian manufacturers. And how much input had to come in from the ICMR, from the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister's office to motivate the best institutes in the country to come forward to help manufacturers to get access to the testing, whether in a DRDO facility or in an army facility or in a railway facility. So something like that is required for all medical devices in a strategic and in a planned manner. And then we can aim to be in the top 5 medical hubs in the world. And there is no reason why we cannot by having this close coordinated working where there is an interdependent ecosystem where hospitals, the Apollos and the Maxes who need high quality products from Indian manufacturers work with the MNCs who put up their plant over here and the mid-size and the smaller Indian manufacturers who make the components and the subcontracted parts for the MNCs for the international market or for directly for the markets in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajiv. That was indeed quite comprehensive. A lot of takeaways there. We must cover decriminalization, infrastructure needs to be relooked at, figure out what needs to be imported, what doesn't need to be imported, look at manufacturing with international collaborations, and how can we get into good quality domestic manufacturing for quality supplies to big healthcare providers, which we have in our country, including Apollo, as you said. So, see, I just like to say we are recording this session, and we would like to, send back a draft contents page at the end of this webinar once we've collated the report. And that contents page needs to be vetted by all the speakers so that we are not leaving out any angle. So that's the importance, and that's the difference of other webinars, which we do just to make a policy advocacy statement. But we want to draw out a good comprehensive contents page. Now, before I go to Vibhav, I'm sure he has a different perspective. I'd like to invite Mr. Bhargav Kotadia for his perspective. He's into, this manufacturing of a lot of cardiology products, one of the leading ones in India. And again, he has proved, I think, as an organization, as to how Indian products can do well in international markets with even strict standards of I think EU and US, if I'm right, Bhargav. So what do you and how do you actually see the roadmap of the medical devices industry, and what would you want to get covered in your from your perspective? Over to you for the next 7 to 8 minutes.
Apologies, I was speaking on mute. Thanks very much, Vivek, and thanks everyone else for joining as well and giving this matter your precious time. But quite a bit quality information has already been shared, so let me speak a little bit beyond it. But I think some of these facts about how import dependent our country is, the fact that especially from regulatory perspective, there needs to be quite a bit of work done. At this point, these have become fairly well-known attributes. So I'll speak a little bit beyond this. As Vivek mentioned, SMC focuses on cardiovascular devices, class 3 medical devices, especially stents, heart valves, and occluders. So the perspective that I take, and I would kind of come at this panel from, is if we want to see India becoming a hub for medical devices manufacturing the way it has already achieved in the pharma sector, I see two perspectives. Right? One is the domestic market and the other one is the international market. For a sector like ours, where relatively speaking, compared to the rest of the world, India is a smaller market, by virtue of the industry, we have had to focus quite a bit on our international markets. We have had to focus on expanding our business in Europe and Latin America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and now even US and Japan. And as I see, one of the things I would point out, if we take examples and lessons from our next door neighbors in China, how they have managed to become such manufacturing powerhouse in each and every segment that they have entered into, it's by focusing not just on the domestic market, but also, and more importantly, the international markets. They've built up their scale and manufacturing capabilities to actually cater the European and American markets, which already have the demand that requires the kind of scale and the kind of investments. And once that scale was established to cater to these large overseas markets, then those were always readily available to cater to the domestic markets as the domestic market came up as well. So nothing to argue or debate on in terms of how much work needs to be done as far as the Indian market goes. Certainly there is quite a bit, but I'm just offering one unique perspective that if as part of this roadmap, if we and the government can pay special attention to the international markets in terms of what do the manufacturers need in order to be able to manufacture in India for the world. Right. Since we are talking about manufacturing, let us not just talk about made in India for India, but let us talk about made in India for the world. Because by doing so, we will be catering to India's need by default. And in this, especially as we get to some of the higher class 2, class 3 medical devices, we see very exorbitant market entry costs. When you talk about the European CE approvals or especially US FDA approvals, the investments can be pretty substantial, And that becomes a competitive disadvantage for an Indian company trying to come up from scratch. So if there are ways and avenues that the government can take up in terms of, how can the Indian manufacturers be supported as they try to apply for these highly regulated markets, I think this can be a very unique aspect that India can take up. Again, the model is right in front of us. We've seen China do this in multiple industries and have done it successfully. So it's no rocket science. And at the same time, in India, we have all the right infrastructure and the right resources, both human capital and otherwise. All that's needed is really the streamlining of the regulatory framework, number one, and number two. But the recently launched PLI scheme certainly goes a long way. But any other scheme that kind of continues to do this work going forward, I think will help the industry in a great extent. I think this would be kind of my unique point, which I believe doesn't get talked about as much. So I wanted to just offer that. Other than that, the topics have been quite well covered by Dr. Subramaniam, Ravi, yourself, and of course Mr. Ravi as well. So I leave it back to you, Vivek.
Okay, thank you so much, Bhargav. I think bringing in a totally different perspective. Yes, we're talking about not only manufacturing in India or getting MNCs to manufacture in India, but we are now talking about how do we actually make in India for the world. So very interesting aspect. So we must cover as to how do we do the harmonization of standards. One, two, how do we actually support exporters for exporting products out of India, be it Indian companies or be it even MNCs who are currently manufacturing or who plan to manufacture in India. So we have the pleasure and the privilege of Dr. V.G. Somani, Drug Controller General of India, joining us at this moment. Thank you, Dr. Somani, for joining us. I just got a glimpse and I could see your window. Thank you so much. A warm welcome to you. And we are indeed very, very happy and delighted to see you.
Thank you.
आजकल वैसे तो मिलना नहीं हो पाता, तो वेब से मिलके उतनी ही खुशी होती है. So it's really wonderful to have you, sir.
Thank you.
So abhi tak, sir, I just want to give you a 1 minute quick round of what has happened. We had our senior vice president giving us the welcome address. He had to leave, but he did announce that DCGI will be joining us around 12 o'clock. And as promised, you have joined. Then thereafter, we had a small remarks which had come in from the chair of the health committee, Dr. Subramanian, who's the medical director for Apollo Hospitals. And then we quickly switched on to discussions where we heard one of the more vocal voices, Rajiv Nath, on what should be happening, and he did talk about what all needs to be done on imports, what all needs to be manufactured, what needs to be manufactured in India, and how can it be done with the help of MNCs. Sorry, I am having a little bad throat. And then I think you came in just at the right moment, when actually Mr. Bhargav Kotadia was talking about, he's from Sejanan Medical Technologies. He was talking about, how Indian companies who are trying to export need to be supported. And one of the important points he also made was, how can we harmonize standards, specifications across probably the nations to help the Indian manufacturers and give other support mechanisms through the government for exporting manufacturers in India, whether it is the multinationals when they start to manufacture in India. So with this quick background, we would like to invite your guidance and your suggestions while we make this report for the government on how to have the medical devices probably reach a peak. And I internally set the target at $75 billion. So with that objective in mind, we would like to hear from you as to what are the key areas we should be covering in this report, and to you, Dr. Somani.
Thank you, Vivek, and thank you, organizers of this event, PhD Chamber of Commerce, and taking a real call on what is the vision of our present government to become Atmanirbhar Bharat, of course, and to organize a webinar on specifically development of a roadmap with regards to national medical technologies. And this is a very timely discussion which you have started. And in this, what is at the core of everything remains is the consumer. Consumer, direct consumer or indirect consumer, because in the devices there are direct consumers and there are indirect consumers also. Mostly there are indirect consumers when we talk about machineries and various kind of things. Of course, all medical products, most except for the OTCs, are having the indirect consumers. They depend on what has been prescribed or what has been described by the doctor or what has been particularly suggested by the physicians. With regards to if any kind of consumer delivery, whether it is a health technology or whether it is a medical technology or any other item, there are three very important aspects, and there are ancillary aspects. One is the quality. People want quality. Second one is the affordability and the access, which is related to the price. And third one is the service delivery, starting from beginning till the end of the life cycle of that product. If these three things we keep in the mind while developing the product life cycle from the economic perspective and also from the regulatory perspective, and keep on monitoring it so that it becomes a reliable solution for the public, for the consumer at a large. And if the regulatory and governmental support mechanism matches with these expectations and industry's pace also matches with these expectations, there is no reason that whether we as Indian manufacturers can remain behind of the entire world. While speaking about the regulation, moving from partly regulated or unregulated to the regulated world, harmonized world, we have to take the baby steps. We have to do it in a very systematic manner, which we can call it as a phased-wise manner, and also while taking into consideration that it does not basically disturbs the actual manufacturing and actual market cycle or consumer cycle which is going on. That is extremely important. The regulation should not be such that it suddenly comes and disturbs the consumer delivery. That is what is our basic aim. While it should aim at that we should have the quality throughout the life cycle of the product as best as possible in the world, so that we can match eyes with the world and not have to ask for something to anybody. And India has come a long way by showing its capabilities, and its manufacturer also have come a long way by showing their capacities to sustain through all kinds of odds and deliver the services. Of course, we have a long way to go. And in that, the government support through the PLI schemes has been a boon and has been an indication that what actually government wants. And there can be many more such solutions if the industry come together and gives us suggestions to the government. As far as regulatory aspects and harmonization of standards are concerned, we are definitely committed to that. And in that, most important aspect is the consensus and the voice of all the stakeholders, manufacturers, consumers, physicians, and the civil society. All these things have to be taken into the consideration. And we are moving in that direction. And all of you know that the indication of a phase-wise regulation has been put in the form of a roadmap, or that has been as first you have to just create a registry of who are the people in this business. Then those people, after having a voluntary registry, there is a 18 months time for voluntary registry once this gazette was published. And after that, then they have to do the compulsory registration, and then thereafter they have to move into the regular licensing regime. We have certainly a very good opportunity to build our capacities and capabilities, learn the lessons from those who have gained through such processes and who have created trouble through these processes for themselves, and choose the one which is the best one. And that has always been the India's strength, that while making any kind of, be it a constitution of India, be it our pharmacopoeias, be it our standard, we have the consensus and all study all and then come to the conclusion that approach. So we are moving with that approach, and we would expect that the indigenous manufacturers should have a full dialogue with the regulators, with the policymakers, so that this manufacturing environment and the environment to support the innovations, basically the innovators needs a lot of support. Not only innovators doesn't mean that only those who innovate the health technology solution at that. Innovations can be in any areas. Innovation can be in the product, innovation can be into the product delivery, the distribution cycle, the trading of the product, utilization of the product, and then there are various new areas of what we say that digitalization, artificial intelligence, use of 3D technologies, and all those things which are coming in the world as a reality, and which has become a reality, and we should be able to encompass those realities also into our capabilities. Then we will be seen as one of the important player, because we are known for making the health technology solutions for the masses, not for the classes. And when it can be made for the masses, when it has a component of accessibility and affordability. And we always, on any fora, it is fora of the WHO, where I represent as the chairman of 194 countries since the last 6 years. I was a vice chair for 4 years, and since last 3 years I'm the chairman over there, where all regulators of this medical devices also have the discussion on these issues. So our voice is heard very carefully, because we are known for the quality. The most important word is the quality and accessible health technology solutions. And our reliability, because of our inherent characteristics of being reliable in comparison to what we talk as our likely competitor, is very high. And we need to maintain that reputation of a high credibility in our quality and affordable solutions. And our regulation should also be in such a manner that it goes in a very phase-wise manner. So expectations from the manufacturer is that they should be in the continuous dialogue for asking for the support from the government with regards to the innovations and ecosystem is concerned. And also, while developing the regulations, we should choose the best and the most suitable for our country, taking the examples from those who have already ventured into such events or such kind of things. So that is what, with this, I would like to once again congratulate you for starting this very good initiative and wish you all the best on that account. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Somani. I think you raised some very, very key points which we would have missed definitely had you not been able to make it to the webinar. I know you had a very, very difficult and a tough schedule, you know, all this while, especially during the COVID times. And I think with all the panelists, so we can't hear the attendees, we should give a big applause to the DCGI office and the Health Ministry for doing a wonderful job during the. Be free to unmute yourself and clap once again.
We haven't done enough. We have a really very hard work yet to do because of this COVID pandemic, which has struck in between. We were got little bit slowed down. Otherwise, we would have been at a very comfortable position with respect to the pace with which we were going. And we are really proud of all the groups, the support which we got from all of you, and we should remain in dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Somani. And I must highlight, specific points which you have talked about and which we will definitely keep in mind while making this report. And as I was telling the panelists earlier, so we are not recording this webinar so that we don't miss out on any point said by any speaker, much less than what is spoken by you. And then we will come up with a contents page, which should be fairly elaborate, I guess, which will give us the headings for making this report to make it 360-degree complete and with all perspectives. And at this forum, we have tried to invite all diverse views and rather strong diverse views also under one roof so that we can hear them all and then suggest the roadmap for the medical technology going forward. And you have talked about quality, price, and service of service-based quality, or quality-based service, which you talked about. You also highlighted the baby steps which we need to take on the harmonized world going forward, and we do not disturb the consumer or the patient delivery mechanism in any which ways while we are doing this harmonization. You also talked about the PLI scheme, which gives us a pointer in the report that, what needs to be done on the existing schemes or what are the new schemes which the industry can suggest for its listing. Innovation is a very, very important aspect you brought out. How do we nurture in case we have to develop in this area, especially considering the fact that you said that the world looks upon, because of your continuous dialogue with the WHO over the last 6 years, the world sees us as a country which will produce quality products for masses. So I think that's one very important. Training is another thing which you talked about, encompassing technologies of artificial intelligence, 3D, and all these things need to be kept in mind. And I think a very, very important point, again, which we would have definitely missed out is what you've talked about is the mechanism of a continuous dialogue, which we should have. So maybe in the report, we will actually suggest what kind of mechanisms can be built up for a continuous dialogue, a formal institutionalized mechanism which can help the industry stay in touch with. So I've got a page full of those, and I can't thank you enough for being here. With that, if all agree, we would like to now request Dr. Jitendra Sharma, who's also sometimes termed as the wizard of the medical devices industry, to kindly, and I must share with you, Dr. Somani, that we've taken on AMTZ as a knowledge partner for this series of webinars. So this is the first in the series. So the next 3 will be also conducted soon by the end of February. And Dr. Sharma and his team at AMTZ will help us assimilate this knowledge plus the tremendous knowledge which he houses in that 100-acre campus. So may I now invite Dr. Jitendra Sharma for his point of view on the medical technology roadmap.
Yeah, thank you very much. Namaskar, Mr. Somani ji and my friends from the industry. Vivek ji, are you able to hear me? Wonderful. So I think, none other than Rohit Sharma has batted before me. Mr. Somani actually telling the roadmap is like MF Hussain painting the picture, and we are all in the art gallery. So I would be very conservative in my remark. You see, the industry, the regulator, the innovator, the economic industrial zone like AMTZ, we all have, perhaps for the first time, due to COVID, also due to certain leadership changes and leadership decisions taken for the advantage of industry in last 1 to 1.5 years, have all been able to come together as a team. Where we are available for each other. We are not unreachable. We are not aliens. We are not seen as people lobbying separate agendas. Right? I think after a very, very long time in the history, Mr. Somani, Mr. Rajiv Nath, they will agree with me that after a very, very long time in history, there is a non-corrupt but single focus approach between all the stakeholders of medical device industry, including the regulator, the quality assessment, the BIS, the industry, the manufacturer together. Now, partly this has been due to COVID, where although there are competing interests and competition, people know that limitations or advantage would fall equally on them. They have equalized themselves. Partly it is also because of the fair-minded approach of decision makers who are sitting on designations that impact the industry and research in a big way. And I'm not naming any particular individual, but I think after a long, long time, we can say that we are together. Without any ill will, without any parallel agendas, we are all together for a common purpose. Now, that common purpose cannot be fulfilled by a single stakeholder. And therefore, you see, I have, as usual, it is better to talk in points. And while AMTZ and Kalam Institute will be helping PhD chambers in reviewing the knowledge paper they generate and supporting them, there are 6 points which I think can make life of all of us little easier than what it is today. Because all the efforts that we are making in our respective mandates, if these efforts could be galvanized, converged, it would lead to overall benefit of everyone. Point number 1 is very simple and something all of us here don't control. That is the HS code, the import-export codes. You see, import-export codes are controlled by Department of Revenue. They impact Tariff Commission, the DGFT, none of whom are here today in the panel. But I was surprised because I joined this webinar for first 5 minutes also when Mr. Multani was speaking his inaugural talk. He mentioned about plastic bottles, hot water bags, acupuncture instruments. Let me tell you, none of us here are perturbed by these items. They are important, no doubt, but they are not specific to our sector. Acupuncture instruments perhaps are not even used today in a big way in medical devices industry, but they figure out in our HS codes. PET CT scan does not. Flat panel detector does not. So, because knowledge is the engine of correct decision making. See, let me also frankly tell you that most of the regulators, all the regulators today, they don't come from an era of license raj. They don't come in an era come from an era of power politics. They don't come from an era of assumptions. They all are evidence-based policy makers who would love to see evidence on the table to take a policy decision in favor of the production and industry. Now, to help them do that, help all of us do that, knowledge is the engine. Garbage in, garbage out. When HS code is excluding something as important as flat panel detector, which is 40% of radiological instruments, but is including hot water bags, what kind of knowledge can come on our tables? And therefore, I think Mr. Rajiv Nath has done a lot of work in this area particularly on the 150, 140 to 150 HS codes, along with Kalam Institute to rationalize these codes. But these HS codes needs to be rationalized as per current needs of the industry and current era of science in the world. That is number one. Number two is, you know, the PLI scheme that has come out, and I was fortunate to chair the drafting committee of the medical devices PLI, and I also chair the technical committee of the medical devices PLI scheme. It's a great beginning, but it's only start of a journey. One PLI scheme can support 28 applications. I would request all of you to urge the government to have PLI scheme at least for next 3 years. For the same sector, same scheme, different target segments, allowing close to 100 applicants to encash the benefit of PLI scheme. Let it not be a one-time affair. Point number 3 is something which is again critical to all of us, but none of us have full control on it. That's because unlike globalized, very developed economies like UK or the US, the R&D on medical technology in India is funded by 16 departments, sometimes duplicating, sometimes not optimizing, sometimes the same project which deserves, for example, an investment if somebody like Mr. Bhargav has to get into transaortic valve, an R&D project of that nature may cost 20 crore. But the fragmented nature of R&D investment across multiple departments may allow that application to get only 2 crore. And that will not do justice to the R&D agenda. The consolidation of R&D funding on medical technology in India is necessary. CSIR, DSIR, DBT, DST, CSIO, there are DHR, you name an organization and they are funding in the name of various schemes. The consolidation is not there and fragmented funding is not leading to prioritized outcomes. And therefore, consolidation of R&D funding and increasing the R&D funding on medical technology at least 5 times. We are a 60,000 crore sector. The regulator gets close to 1,000 plus applications of new products in a year. How do you anticipate that such a sector can live with an R&D funding of say 200 crores? It is a 60,000 crore sector. It needs at least 5% of a budget from the government on R&D. And therefore, 5% of 60 crore is 3,000 crore, which is the same as the budget for PLI scheme. And therefore, just like PLI scheme has given 5% of the sector's size on production, 5% should go on R&D to private as well as public institutions, but in a consolidated manner. The point number 4, and I will stop with 2 more points. The point number 4 is we all live in an era of social maximization, which means an N95 mask which is available for 300 rupees, we will all desire that it should also come, it should come at 60 rupees, which is nice. RT-PCR kit prices should not be 4,000 rupees, it should be 600 or 800 rupees, which is good. But an IVD kit requires 3 years of research. An N95 mask, now Brazil is coming up with IoT-enabled N95 mask. The mask itself would have SpO2 and temperature measurement sensors. To do that, you need funding. And to fund, you need revenue. And therefore, while social maximization is desirable and price rationalization is desirable, I think free fall of prices should be arrested quickly. The way PPE and mask free fall of prices have eroded industry, if the same erosion would have happened in the stock exchange, it would have made headlines, it would have made 3 committees by now evaluating how the fall of share market should be arrested because it's killing the economy. But when it happens, for example, with a pacemaker or an implant or N95 mask, we don't care. We don't care because social maximization is the goal, which is correct goal. But free fall should not be there. And therefore, my 4th point, a very tangential suggestion, is while we give the MRP, which is maximum, for critical products, we should also for next 3 years or 2 years predict what should be the minimum price, so that industry is able to invest on those product segments in a sustained and credible manner. Today, nobody is investing on many product segments because they don't know at what level the prices will crash to. There is a company called Salagnostics in Israel, funded by Startup Nation Central, the Israel Innovation Hub. They have come down to making triglycerides, biochemistry, and many other diagnostics possible just by a finger touch on saliva, on your tongue. Touch the finger and it will tell the result. Why are we not able to do? Because we don't know when we do it, after 3 months, what will be the cost per test. Somewhere, I think the free fall of crash in prices of commodities have to be arrested, controlled, so that industry and researchers are able to invest on the new science. And point number 5, not every regulator in medical devices is CDSCO, which is by and large now regulated with an electronic application management. If you today apply for BIS certification for mask, BIS does not have even its own labs. They send it to labs of mask producers, which are competitors to the product which is undergoing certification, which is not correct. You see AERB, they have a different portal called ELORA. There are, if you make insecticide treated bed nets, mosquito bed nets, for example, for malaria control program in India, it has to go to Central Insecticide Board. You make an COVID diagnostic kit, it has to go to NIV and ICMR before it comes to ICMR, before it comes to CDSCO. Now look at this fragmented scenario. We have more than 16 regulators for various medical devices in India, from radioisotope to masks, from MRI, which is non-ionizing radiation, to X-ray tubes. And therefore, the VFS Global visa concept is very interesting. Irrespective of which country's visa you apply, you can track your application on VFS Global. The embassy of that country can see only their applications, avoiding duplication. So while all our regulators have some have good systems like Sugam, some have evolved systems like ELORA, some don't have any systems at all like BIS. If we can have all regulatory, not a single regulator, that will never work. Let all the regulators exist doing the great job they are doing as per the mandate of their respective legislations. But their regulatory platform process, if it can be converged into a single electronic platform, where all the various other platforms of regulators merge and can tap data from, duplications will be avoided, and manufacturers can actually on one portal go from CDSCO to Central Insecticide Board, from AERB to BIS, each regulator viewing what they have to view. But if some regulator have cross-ticked what they have been satisfied with, if the other regulator also has to see the same thing, it automatically goes as tick mark. It will make the life of many regulators who are actually spending time till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the offices easy by avoiding duplication and bringing convergence to the applicants. So with these 5 points, I stop here. I think the wisdom of all of you put together almost represents a century of wisdom. All of you have 10 to 15, 20 years of experience. If this 100, 150 years of experience that is today visible on this virtual panel is put into action, I think these 5 points can make the life of everyone smoother, easier, and safer for patients. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sharma. For a very, very explicit and expressive details of what all we should be talking about and covering ground. So while we were looking for bullets for the contents page, we are getting a lot of information which can go as suggestions under those bullets in the running pages, which is very, very good and very, very fertile. And plus, some of the details are also giving us topics or subtopics which we must carry in our content page, because that is a single point focus of this particular webinar to start with. And as you said, there is nobody here from the HS Code or the Ministry of Commerce side. The idea here is that we are able to collate all the variables which we are going to actually have in our report, and the subsequent 3 webinars cover the stakeholders of those variables to be present and to also take their input and feedback as to why and how they can actually probably help us on that. And wonderful points. I wouldn't like to read all of them out, but I have noted all of them down. And with that, I think it's very important to listen to what a company like Boston Scientific thinks of. Where do they see the India in their roadmap? That's also going to be very critical. And how do they see India's roadmap for the medical device technology sector? So over to my friend from Boston Scientific, Vibhav.
Thank you, Vivek, for the opportunity and opportunity to participate in this wonderful panel who is discussing about the roadmap for medical devices in the country. While Dr. Sharma had the dilemma of Rohit Sharma batting before him, I have a dilemma of Rohit Sharma and Shikhar Dhawan both batted before me, so it's a difficult job for me as well. So, but I'll try to justify my presence here. I think a lot of good comments have already been made by my previous speakers, both from government and from the industry side. I'll try to sort of create a sort of a outline around it, which will help, I think, you, Vivek, who's putting down all the framework for this roadmap or the policy, and also all of us to sort of think through as to what are we missing when we are deliberating on these areas. So, let us think it from a, when I thought about national medical device policy in whatever years I've been in the industry, the closest thing that I could think about is the national health policy, right? Which has been there for last, 20 plus, 30 plus years, I would say. Every 10 or 12 years, there is one policy coming in. So I'm also hoping, that this medical device policy or the roadmap will be at least valid for next 7 to 10 years, if not more, though the technology is changing very fast. But I think we need a reference document in front of us, which is guiding everybody, for next 7 to 10 years. So that is one point that I wanted to make, that, a reference document for all of us. The second area is, I think, we are talking about India, where, per capita spent on medical devices as low as like $4 to $5, right, per person per capita. And therefore, I think there is we don't need to be really myopic in our view when we think about a policy for the country of such a sector which is so important to be able to deliver the quality health care for, for 1.3 billion plus people year and year after year after year. So I think we need to be little broader in our thinking what should go in this policy or this roadmap, which is obviously, I think while the health policy talks about the quality healthcare for all, here I think the vision of this national medical device roadmap or the policy should be, the access, the availability, and the affordability of medical devices for everybody in the country, which Dr. Somani talked about, which Dr. Sharma also talked about. So if we have these three things refer to, I think we are achieving the goal of national medical device policy in the country. Now, when we talk about access, availability, and affordability, I think one important area is, Vivek, that all stakeholders must find a place in the policy. Industry must find a place, the government must find a place, the consumer must find a place, and the consumer both, and Dr. Somani was talking about it, the direct consumer and the indirect consumer both should find a place. And of course, the most important part, the academia should find a place here. So I think all these stakeholders must find a place, to talk about and well-defined role of these stakeholders in the policy, right? So if I talk about, I will not really go into, whether import is good or bad for the country, whether manufacturing is good or bad for the country. Of course, everything has its own benefit, when they come to the context. So we have to have good manufacturing, good larger base of manufacturing in the country. But let me remind you, Vivek, that there is no country in the world who is producing 100% in the country, right? There are the largest country like US are also importing 30, 35%, 40% of their requirement. But then I'm not getting into that debate. I'm getting into what it should entail when we talk about a policy, what should it entail. So from an industry perspective, it is important that we talk about, the manufacturing. We talk about the sales, distribution, and the marketing. We talk about the R&D and the innovation. We talk about the operations, because whenever an investment comes to a country, Vivek, you really talk about two components of the investment: the capital expenditure with the initial investment, and the operational expenditure, which is the lifetime of the company in the country. And I think this policy must address both the parts of the investment. CapEx, how my CapEx would be safe in the country, how do I get the maximum output or maximum return on my investment, and then what will make my operations in the country smooth. The ideas that Dr. Sharma talked about, Dr. Somani talked about, I think Rajiv also talked about, and of course Bhargav talked about, how do we really make operations more and more smoother in the country, good regulations in place, obviously the setup, the incentives for export, for domestic market. And then Bhargav also talked about India is not enough market. Then it should find a place in the policy. How do we really enhance the market? Obviously, investment in the healthcare overall is important, right? But that investment, that incremental investment on healthcare, how would it translate into enhancing the market for medical devices should be clearly defined in the policy. So I think that is another area, that we're talking about. And then when it comes to operations, the most important part comes to the regulation. And Dr. Sharma, thank you for raising that concern of 16 regulator, regulating this industry. I think that is the most important, consideration that must go into the policy document, this roadmap document. Then how do we really converge these regulators at one platform, if not in one regulator? So this is from the industry, sort of a thought process, or industry as a stakeholder, what it needs to entail. Now, when it comes to government, how the government is going to increase the investment into medical devices, both, in the manufacturing side, incentivization, which is PLI, everybody talked about it. But then from an R&D and innovation perspective, what is the roadmap for that from government perspective? How government is going to create pools or funds that Dr. Sharma again talked about? Can we sort of pool all the R&D funds available in the government ministries, at one platform, so that the industry has access both from governments and the private perspective? Then, of course, the regulation that it's government sort of the prime responsibility to smoothen the regulation. And Dr. Somani keep talking about, how do we make easy regulation which are providing quality but easy to comply, right? I think so. Both things, go hand in hand. And he has been the biggest advocate, and we have seen the tremendous amount of sort of transformation in the medical device regulation last few years in his leadership. Then, of course, how the government is going to sort of ensure the access, the availability, and the affordability. So access, availability are very, very important. So that the patient has access and availability of medical devices that are elsewhere available in the world. The patient doesn't have to go out of the country to really access, for a given medical device. So I think, how do we really work around that? And then, of course, affordability will go hand in hand, because at times prices makes it inaccessible. And I think so we need to work around that path as well. So that becomes, from a government perspective. And then I think another important area comes into picture is the public-private partnership in medical devices, right? That is something which is very, very important. A clear black and white policy for PPP, whether it is for manufacturing perspective, whether it is for R&D perspective, or whether it is even go-to-market perspective, the PPPs, right? Equally important. And then industry academia collaboration, we have been talking about it, we have been working around it, but there is no clear policy around it. So can we get into that side also? These are the few things which I thought would be useful from a government perspective in the policy. And finally, when I come to consumer or the hospital, right? So Dr. Somani talked about it, direct consumer, indirect consumer. So I think the safety, as he talked about, the safety is one of the most important criteria. What can go into the policy which ensures that medical device coming out or used by a patient is actually safe enough? And we are targeting the practices like reuse, right? Reuse of single-use devices. One of the most critical areas after pandemic, you're talking about infections here. How do we really create, maybe a chapter or a paragraph on not getting the reuse of single-use devices? I think those areas must find a place from a consumer perspective in the roadmap or the policy. And then finally, the adoption. The 4 A's that we talk about. So we talked about access, availability, and affordability, but the adoption of medical technology, because medical technology is something you need to get trained on from a doctor perspective. So therefore, adoption is equally important, both from a government perspective and a consumer, which is indirect consumer or the direct consumer, that you are really well trained on these technologies which are coming in. And finally, the collaboration part of it. How does patient, doctor, hospital, and the industry collaborate to really bring out newer technologies in the marketplace, which can really benefit the end consumer, which is the patient? So I take a break here, and thank you so much for this opportunity, Vivek. I appreciate this.
Thank you very much, Vaibhav. Very well articulated, and I think a lot of key points coming in, I think, related to PPP and industry academia. Yes, you're very right. We do talk about it quite often, but we don't have a framework in which, we can encourage. And I think, if I remember correctly, Secretary Pharma has tried to make a certain inroad into it by asking NIPERS to, conduct these kind of collaborations, and also a framework to work with the industry. A very important point which you talked about was adoption, which Dr. Somani also talked about. How do we actually train people? Training was a very key point which Dr. Somani talked about. So how do we actually train people? It should also be typically there. So taking on from here, Weber, I'd like to now invite Mr. Manish Sardana. Mr. Manish Sardana is the President for India Business for Polymedicure. So it'd be good to hear you, Manish. I think we've heard a lot of things today, and I think I will be running out of pages which I had kept for this particular meeting, but it's always nice learning new and more things. Over to you, Manish.
Thank you very much, Vivek. I hope you can hear me. Okay. It's a pleasure to be in company of all of you. It's a learning for myself also. I was just going through when everybody was talking, when Rajiv ji started, Bhargav and everyone. Then I said, oh, okay, they have also talked about this. What it leaves me to talk about. Okay, this is also gone. What do I talk about? So I'll just try and bring them something which I think, which is my personal view. We talked about demand. Atmanirbharta is what? The gap between demand and supply. And we all know that our demand is scaling up because of the diseases scaling up, the population is going up. We were only talking about NCDs. Now suddenly we are again talking about infectious diseases. Second, affordability is going up. Government is focusing on affordability. Our own selves are affording on affordability. Accessibility is going up, is becoming better, and which is leading to the demand scaling up. The supply side, we all know that we have, everybody talks about 70% or 80% import. But please understand, import and export is not necessarily because of sufficiency levels. It's also because of users' preference. Now I have instances here. Bhargav is there. Bhargav manufactures stents, but then they export stents and they consume it in India. Similarly, Boston is there, which also have their stents being used in India. So it's not about whether we are sufficient about any product. I'm the world's third largest manufacturer of IV cannulas. I not only use it in India, I also export them. Similarly, my counterparts, or the bigger counterparts, they also import it in India. So it's not about sufficiency only. It's also about the acceptability of my local manufacturing or my made in India, wherein possibly we all need to do a lot who are making it in India. So that's from the demand and supply side. I would instead of talking about the operational challenges which we all have, I would be more harping on the demand side. For anybody to focus on making it in India, I think local demand is very, very important. Government is already working on that. Government has taken a notice of that. They are working on affordability. They talked about Ayushman Bharat. They're also talking about PPOs, which means government is clearly saying if you want to participate in my procurements, you need to make it in India. So these are the two ways government is trying to scale up that demand side, and they need to continue doing that. On the in addition, you need a complete ecosystem, which could be in form of availability of raw materials. I am a manufacturer, but then if I'm dependent on some other countries for raw material, what do I do about make it in India or finished products, right? So that also should be a part of my ecosystem in India. Availability of skilled labor, skill, which I think all of us are working on. Government is also working on, which I think one of my speakers also talked about. Academia, engaging with them, developing the skill locally. And last but not the least, regulatory framework, which I think my speaker, Dr. Somani and Dr. Sharma already mentioned, and government is already focused on that. There is already a push on the demand from government and state. They're already working on med devices. They're already doing a lot on ease of doing business and PLI scheme, which was for the manufacturers. 28 applications. And I have I feel proud to say I'm one of them, right? And we know that we are bullish about future, but not for India, but for export also. We export to almost 110 countries, right? So it's not that I'm not a multinational, even I am a multinational, just that sitting in India, I'm a domestic company. Boston is an American company. So Termo is a Japanese company. I'm an Indian company. But when I go to outside, I also become a multinational. So in America, I'm multinational, Boston is domestic. So that's all I think that we need to start looking at. It's an overall, it cannot be we or them. The self-sufficiency will not happen if we try and make everything in India. We would need to bring every player to start making it in India, and they would start making it in India only when they see a local demand. So demand push is very important. If I have to stop here and just focus on what could be my key ask to the policymakers, I think I would request them to continue thrusting on the demand increase. Please continue putting that effort. That is going to be the most critical for me to become sufficient. I can only become sufficient when people outside, they also start looking at my demand and start making it in India. When they made it in India, they will definitely supply to my demand, cater to my demand locally. Government is already working on PPOs. Yes, please continue that. When I say, they are saying that, okay, whatever I procure, if you are making it in India, you get a preference. I think that's a fair ask, which should continue. In addition, I would also request possibly look at that. It's not only important to make it in India, it's also important to design it in India or innovate it in India. Because if you are innovating in India, be it me or be it some other German or American company, the possibility for them to start making it in India probability goes up. So it will be also be important if some sort of I wouldn't call it as a PLI, but some sort of R&D linked incentives, if that can come in the future, similar to production linked incentives, I think that will be really helpful. Last but not the least, I think we all need to work towards that, and with the effort from government, acceptability among the masses, or what Dr. Samani called about consumers. Mind you, there is no longer patience. Patience is moving towards being a consumer. They are becoming demanding, and they have the right to choose. And if I have the right to choose, so incidentally, presently, I am driven by Western world. That's how I drive my decision making. So how can government help us make the made in India product also acceptable among the consumers? I think that government can play a major role in that. That's where my request to government would be. On the operational side, I think government is already helping us out. There are some imbalances in terms of duty structures. When I say imbalances, it means imbalance in terms of import of raw material and import of finished product for that. But I think the government has been having favorable discussions with all of us. So that would be more on the operational side. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you very much, Manish. Bringing in quite a fresh perspective, I would say, when you're talking about, the consumer preferences and sufficiency, self-sufficiency, or the Atmanirbhar Bharat. So what you're saying is very interesting, that, self-sufficiency doesn't mean no imports. It doesn't, even America, as you said, US also does, as Vibhav also talked about, imports 30-35% of its products, being a large manufacturer, a large country for manufacturing of medical devices. So it's not that. So a fresh perspective we see there, very interesting. The fact that you have to import raw materials, skills, regulatory, and demand push is, I think, what you've been harping on, as I could hear from you. So great listening. Yes, the panel discussion becomes more intense and more difficult as a lot of topics, a lot of points which you have in your notepad, get ticked off. So with a difficult, I would say, ground, I would now like to move to Mr. Rajesh Patel, the CEO IVD India from Triviton Healthcare. So I know you have a tough task, but we trust you to be able to, still keep contributing with your intelligence. And that's why I think you are one of the, last speakers. Before I go to Vivek, my namesake, and as the namesake, knowledge and balanced knowledge. So that's why I'm keeping you for the last, because we must have our desserts right. So over to Mr. Patel.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for giving this opportunity to speak on development of National Medical Technology Roadmap. As we are talking on the subject which is connected to Atmanirbhar Bharat, and I representing a manufacturing Indian company, and as Vaibhav said that like we are a domestic company in India, but the moment we go out of India, we become a multinational organization. And India is full of talents. India develops talent beyond any of the global talent because the first challenge India or Indian company faces that 70% of India always remain rural. So whenever we try to develop any product, we have to develop a product for masses. Here, not only the quality, not only the affordability, not only the post-sales service or post-sales support which is required, but the flawless availability, making the flawless availability in rural India, where you can say that the same country sees the temperature of -2 in Jammu and 51 in Churu in 12 months' time. So the temperature variation of 53 degree, the same diagnostic kit has to travel in -2 also and 51 plus degrees centigrade also. With respect to the motivation, the appreciation given by the government initiative, it is really enormous. Lot of appreciable steps are taken by Government of India to really motivate the Indian manufacturers. 22nd of March, we all could really start experiencing the COVID entrance in India, and then first school shut down, then the work from home concept came, and then first we clapped, then we beat the plates, and then lot many exercises have happened till now in last 8 months time. Company like Trivitron, and not only Trivitron, many other companies who were not even knowing much about COVID today have become like a company who is the one of the largest supplier to various state and central government institutions. And this was all possible because of the motivation we got from Government of India initiatives. At the same time, the available talents within the country. Today, Indian companies have really grown up to the extent where, like many of the tenders, even if the condition can be put that this particular tender is 100% for Indian research development based or Indian manufacturers, I don't think so that any of the central or state government would have any of the scarcity of the product. Last week, I had an opportunity to visit AMTZ. I had an opportunity to meet Dr. Jitendra Sharma also, and the way the campus is developed, it speaks about the Indian company's caliber. It speaks about the timeliness, the way the project is delivered, and the way the quality products are made available for Indian individuals. So the schemes like PLI, as rightly said by Dr. Jitendra Sharma also, that such schemes should be for a specific period, means should not be ending with 1 year or so, maybe 3 to 5 years we should have that PLI kind of scheme. Some kind of more incentivization should be there for the companies who are R&D based, not only the manufacturing based, but also the R&D based, where they are really spending the talent, the lot of amount in developing the products. And here R&D does not mean the reverse engineering, that you bring in the product and you open it and once again pack it in a different way is R&D. Maybe developing right from the scratch really require motivation. Requesting the government authorities sitting over here, part of this particular part webinar, that the free fall of the product prices, somewhere some capping should be there, because it really demotivates to those organizations who bring in the products right from the scratch. If it is just an OEM kind of arrangement, or it is just a reverse engineering kind of arrangement, the like working on very less profit or thin profit is possible, but when the initial expenditure is already made at a huge side, so we require some more motivational initiative by Government of India to really motivate Indian R&D based manufacturing company. So availability of skilled workers, the other eminent speakers have already told about the availability of eminent speakers. So I believe as a representative of Indian manufacturing company, an Indian R&D based manufacturing company, that yes, we have all the caliber, whatever this country requires. If the time, motivation and support is given to us, we can really deliver to the expectation of government as well as the authorities. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks for this opportunity to speak on this forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Patel, for being so brief and concise, and hitting the bullseye and keeping the momentum and the motivation levels high for Indian manufacturers. And I think Indian manufacturers who are all over the world, I mean, also can be termed as transnational. So a transnational is a MNC, as Manish said, back in US, and vice versa. So I think we're all doing a wonderful job. We're on the right track. A lot of optimism I see today, and a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of bright ideas, which we can take to the policymakers, and we as an industry can also equally contribute to a whole lot of them. So which brings me to Mr. Vivek Tiwari, and before that, I just like to say, and keeping up the commitment which we had from Shri Navdeep Rinwa, the Joint Secretary. I have a message from him, and plus I also spoke to him last evening, and he told me, Vivek, today the situation is these days so bad that even if we work throughout the night, we won't be able to finish the work. So he sent 2 points, I think, which we must mention here. One is he's talked about that we must get a clear roadmap on the inverted duty structure, which the industry keeps talking about. So we must get micro level details, as he's like to put it, granular details level granular details of what are the issues related to inverted duty structure. And the second thing, I think we've been talking about PLI a lot. So something related to that, what he said is that what are the phased manufacturing practices or way forward which the industry would like to look at? So is there a phased manufacturing plan? Like we are suggesting here that let PLI continue for 3 years or 5 years. So do we have, as manufacturers, as industry, any phased manufacturing plans, or we need any enablement for that? Like another thing which came up was a minimum selling price. So anything related to these 2 areas, he said, I'll appreciate in case the industry does come back to us and you include it in your report. And he was very categorical that please give us actionables in bullets. Let's not have policy which talks about a lot of things and it's quite nicely worded and things. Let's get down to brass tacks. Tell us action points, what you would want us to do, and we'll definitely do that. So that was a very optimistic statement which he made last night when he was talking to me, and then he sent me this message. So with this, may I invite Mr. Vivek Tiwari, the CEO of Medica Bazaar, and it'll be great listening to you, namesake, and your smile is very, very impressive. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Vivek ji, and I would like to sweeten this panel with my last, kind of closing comments, make it much more interesting for everyone to hear. Though I represent the startup voice in this forum, and I think it's important to listen to startups in this emerging and growing economy. But before that, I have been to many panels, many tech panels, a techie at heart, a founder by passion, many industry panels, but this panel is really special to me. I have 3 great inspiration from this, kind of people in this panel. The first one is Somani sir. I met you first in 2018 and was really inspired listening to you in one of the forums. Dr. Sharma have been inspiring, and always whenever I meet him, is an infectious energy keeps me driving. And third is Rajiv sir. You have been very, very inspiring all the time whenever I meet you. And also all the admirable companies here in this panel with whom we work, and really happy to listen, especially Bhargav ji. You know, the way SMT has been transformed in the last 5-6 years. I'm not a very old hand in this industry, but I have really, you know, seen that transformation happening. Now, coming back to the topic, let me start. I've been an avid reader. Let me start something with the development economics and kind of economic, you know, history of our neighbor like China. You know, when GATT to WTO transformation, early 90s, what changed China? China was a closed economy. What changed China? I think for the first 10 years, China was only doing one thing, which others must understand and must appreciate. They were just developing a skill in their country. They were not doing trading. They were never open to a great trading kind of a country. But for first 8 to 10 years, they started putting a lot of skill in the population for them to be prepared for the outer world. I think that's the pace, that's the point which changed China from being what it is today, what it was yesterday to what it is today. I think that's where we need to really understand that any development starts with three things. First is mindset. Whether you have the interest or intent to develop or to create the massive development strategy, whatever you have to take up. The next is a skill set. Whether you really have the skills to do that, or are you prepared for that onslaught in terms of looking at development. And third, you know, obviously the resources. We heard a lot from everyone here in the panel about resource, about challenges, funding. Dr. Sharma briefly touched upon the R&D expenses which are required in the country. I think resource is critical element. I think I really feel during my startup experience of last 5 to 6 years and meeting kind of tens and hundreds of smaller medical devices companies and trying to bring them on the digital platform to give them access, I really feel that they were lacking resources. I feel the mindset was great. The skill sets, we can match anyone in this world because we are one of the most adaptable kind of population in the world today. But we really lack resources. When I see that Indian manufacturers competing with on a global scale, they really need to have volumes. They really need to have resource on their side to compete. I think that's where we are lacking. I really take the cue from Bhargav here, who said, India, not for made in India, but made for the world. I think that's where we are lacking the intent of doing it. So I really urge government to create and build resources for our Indian entrepreneurs and innovators to really scale up to the national level or even to the international forums. On top of it, innovation is the key. We all know that. And we really innovate and we really renovate very well. I think as Medica Bazaar, we are not doing a great innovation, but we are really renovating the processes. We are really reaching out to the masses through digital medium. We are really bringing a lot of supply chain solutions, but we are really good at renovation. I think that brings a lot of perspective, not just from innovation, but also to look at the renovation element in the overall ecosystem. And then on top of it, there are many other factors like affordability. I think affordability is a relative term. You know, what is affordable to you may not be affordable to me. So creating, you know, kind of, I think more than masses, I think we need to really think of the classes mindset here. Really think of making a tier pricing, I think is important for industry to really scale up and to build the kind of pool or resources for survival. I think generalizing or giving, you know, some access in terms of making prices fit for all kind of a policy may be really deterring to the overall industry. I think that's where we really need to think about. Survival of the smallest player in the industry is critical for growth and for development of the industry. The next is accessibility. I think accessibility is a vicious cycle. You know, accessibility does not happen just on its own. It's driven by various factors in the industry. You know, when we talk about accessibility, you really need volumes to come in. You know, when we talk about you know, volumes with certain manufacturers, they're clueless because they don't know what is the mix between the price and the volume. So this is where I think we really need to give them certain assured, you know, kind of volumes or certain assured commitment from government side. They need to be given access to government institutions to build on that volumes. These are few things which I feel as a perspective from talking to various stakeholders in the industry today and bringing digital solutions for enabling supply chain efficiency in industry. That's what I can comment from my side. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivek, for all those points related to 2 R's, which I could see in your talk, the resources and the renovation. And I think you brought in very important things from the SMEs point of view, which we need to definitely look into. And I must add on this point, we are working very closely with close to about 18 associations, small associations of medical device manufacturers in and around the clusters of medical devices also, so that we can hear their voices as well and their understanding. We will be taking up, as voices to talk on these platforms as we go by into our next 3 webinars, so that, we cover from top to the smallest part in terms of the manufacturing units. We cover all stakeholders. We will have consumer voices coming and talking to us, what would they want to see in the medical technology going forward. So I think on the volumes part, when you mentioned, if Dr. Sharma is listening, he might like to vouch for this, that in Andhra Pradesh, they did say that, all those manufacturers and innovative products they are coming up with in the AMPZ, which by good fortune, I've been a part of that success, that entire story from the day one of groundbreaking. The Andhra government said that, yes, we will buy back a certain percentage of your products, to help you sustain the difficult initial times. So I think that was very, very interesting. So though I did promise Rajiv a presentation, but though we may not have time, but Rajiv, would you like to say something before I request Dr. Somani if he can give us the closing remarks? Rajiv, please unmute yourself.
Thanks, Vivek, and that was very interesting inputs coming in from all perspectives. Nice 240, 360-degree view, I would say, from the regulator, from the various manufacturers, from the distribution side, large and small manufacturers, Indian and overseas MNCs. So everybody's aspirations and thought process, what they want to see succeed in India. So जब दिल कहता है तो दिमाग भी वही कहता है, तो we have to follow that where the heart and the mind converges, I would say, over there. And sometimes people feel that I or IMED is against imports. It's not like that. Imports has a place in the country, but too much of anything is bad. So of course, HMD as a company, of course, has offices outside of India, and we aspire to grow. But I think overprotection has been bad for the country. Over globalization also has been bad for the world. So we do need to somewhere rationalize and follow the middle path. We do need regulations, but they cannot suddenly become at the regulations which you would say have to be harmonized with the best in the world. Yes, we know what the vision has to be, where we have to go, but we have to follow a reasonable pathway. And in terms of transitioning to that, this is, I think, a very big misunderstanding and a misconception. That if somebody is given a time period, say 2 years or 3 years, to switch over from one system to other system, it's not like when the date will pass, if he will not be able to qualify, then he will be treated as non-qualified and flouting the law and being harmful to the patient. When for 30 years he's making the product without regulations, his products can't be killing people overnight because he is not compliant to that. So what we need in the system when we say transition is its coexistence of what is the earlier system, regulated or not, and the new system. So internationally also both systems coexist for that transition period, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, which allows people to transit at their own speed. The rabbits and the hares will run faster than the plodders. So some will get it first and some will get it later on. But let the people who are competent to get the licenses first who have lower inventories to switch over first from the earlier packaging material to the new packaging material, the compliances or whatever, and the plotters can come in later on. But let us not leave it for the last day. And when we leave it for the last day, we create, I would say, havoc, and the bureaucrats get irritated with us that we keep on asking for more time. When we say we want more time, we don't want more time in terms of 2 more years or 3 more years of non-compliances. We just need a parallel time to comply with what is reasonable and implementable. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Somani.
Thank you, Rajiv. I think I loved your first sentence, "Jahan dil aur dimag ki baat meal khaye," where they both meet. Because a lot of people say dil ki suno, dimag ki suno, but you came out with a nice one. Ki jahan dono mile, I think that's the right way to take it. And I think that's the beautiful thing which has ever in 120 minutes that what has happened today. I think we've been able to come together. Dr. Sharma was definitely saying they're all one-minded, though he may have seen it more often than I do. But then today I could see so much of consensus, so much of bonhomie, I think, because we are actually pursuing just one path of, how do we take medical devices to $75 billion as an industry. So my heartfelt thanks to all the panelists, and I think it will be only appropriate for me to invite Dr. Somani to kindly give his concluding remarks and what does he feel about the entire conversation, entire discussion which we've had today. Over to you, Dr. Somani.
Thank you, Vivek ji, and thank you all the panelists, Manish Sardana ji, Vaibhav Garg, Rajiv Nath ji, Rajesh Patel, and Vivek Tiwari ji, of course, Jitendra Sharma ji. I could not have the opportunity to hear the earlier panelists, but it was, very extremely useful thought process wherein we got all the views where how the R&D link policies also need to be brought in, how the PPP should be brought in, how the academia and industry partnership has to be brought in, how the minimum pricing has also to be thought about, innovation and renovation also has to be thought about, the imbalances, the inverted duty structure also has to be thought about, and this transition of the regulatory in a seamless manner has also been pointed out. All these processes makes our thought process and our roadmap very concise and elaborate also at the same time, so that we do not lose the sight of what we are expecting. And if we keep on this track, we will reach the destination, and we will reach the destination happily and together. And that's what this particular panel and this discussion has brought in. And this will, I'm quite sure that this will definitely give very good solutions to all of us. Thank you very much, organizers, and thank you all the panelists for their quite elaborate views. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Somani, for those kind words. And because we cannot thank enough all the panelists and of course the DCGI, Dr. Somani, I invite Mr. Bhargav Kotadia, also our ex-co-chairman of the Health Committee of PhD Chamber. We are still grappling with the new presidency taking over and things happening. So I will like to give this privilege to Mr. Bhargav Kotadia to express a formal vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Sir, honor to see you again. Like I'm sure everyone else, we wish this could have been in person. We always love hearing you, and whatever, while the road ahead is long and quite a bit is yet to be achieved. I think wherever the industry has reached today, we owe sincerely great many thanks to you. The last 2 hours that you have spent with us are only a glimpse of actually all the hard work that you and your team do behind the scenes. And any opportunity that we get to thank you is not enough. But at least the one that I have on behalf of the entire PhD and all the panel and also the many members in the audience that we have today as well. But sincere thanks for all the hard efforts and your leadership.
Thank you very much, Bhargav, for doing the honors. And my express thanks to all the panelists. I'd like to name all of them, starting with Mr. Bhargav Kutadia, Mr. Rajiv Nath, Mr. Manish Sardana, Mr. Rajesh Patel, Mr. Vibhav Garg, Mr. Vivek Tiwari. I think you've added so much to the knowledge today. It's tremendous, and thank you very much for sparing your time. And my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Sumani for being here. And believe you me, we are indebted to you for this 1.5 hours which you've spent with us, because it's added so much to our confidence, so much to our motivation levels, and of course the guidance which you have given us during your talk.
I have learned a lot. It's not like that I have added something. Thank you.
That's your humility. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sharma.
Wishing everyone a very happy new year to all the panelists.
Thank you.
Happy
New Year to all of you.
New Year. Thank you. Thank you, Suman.
Of organizing this.
Thank
you. Better year next year, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rajiv.